I love seeing people. I love our operators that truly get to leave the corporate world and do it for themselves. They're starting their own business. And so that's really exciting for me is I love to watch people go from just purchase a house to now super successful, doing it on their own terms, and then scaling too. You don't have to have just one. In Minnesota, as a director, you can have up to 5. They can be a director, now you have another 5. It's really fun to see someone go from that beginning of just buying a house all the way up to potentially 5 or more properties and really changing their life.
Welcome to the Ral Room Assisted Living Podcast with your hosts, Charlie Cameron and Alex Schlow. This is your go-to show for cutting-edge insights from industry leaders in residential assisted living.
Whether you're ready to launch your own assisted living business or looking to invest in this fast-growing, high-impact sector, we are here to equip you with the tools, strategies, and confidence you need to succeed. Get ready to ride the silver tsunami and change the future of senior care. Now on to today's show.
Welcome back to today's episode of the Ral Room Assisted Living Podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Cameron, and today we are thrilled to have Zach Rynders joining us today. Zach is the co-founder and director of operations for R2 Studios Architecture, which is a Minnesota-based firm specializing in converting residential homes into licensed assisted living homes. So really excited about this, a little different than our usual guests. So this will be cool because we'll be able to kind of dig into the tactics of what makes a good home to convert and the conversion process. So Zach, why don't you give us a little introduction to you, the company, and how you even got into the assisted living niche within that space.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So R2 Studios Architecture, my wife, Anna, is actually our architect. She was an architect for Lifetime Fitness. And in 2020, obviously gyms were shut down. We know why.
Yeah.
And so she was furloughed. And so she actually started working on some contracting stuff. And we were doing really well at that. And kind of overnight, our contract was cut off. They offshored everything. And so it was really, we were starting from scratch, right? And so this was in 2023. And coincidentally and luckily enough for us, that was at the same time that Minnesota required a licensed architect to sign off on any assisted living plans. So before that, operators or owners could do chicken scratches, write their own plans, and they were finding there were too many inconsistencies. And so they made that requirement. And in doing so, a month later, we got our first one. And by referral, we have just expanded. So now we've done over 200, probably closer to 210 at this point.
210 conversions, doing the plans for them. That's pretty wild. That's a short timeline to have done that many. Sounds like a lot of work. I don't fully know how much work it is, but the architects we've worked with, it looks like it's quite the workload. So that's pretty cool that you've gone through 210. And do we know how many of those have opened at this point?
Probably at least 3/4.
Okay.
So the typical process in Minnesota would take around 4 to 6 months. And so ideally anything outside of that window has already been approved.
Okay. That's interesting. And I definitely think that most states are moving in that direction where it's going to be required to have actual stamped plans because we've even had some that are like, oh, and we need an engineer to sign off on the HVAC and we need an electrician to sign off on, and we need a plumber to sign. And I think they're getting more tactical and in the weeds on your plans, which isn't a bad thing, right? You want it to be right. When you first started in this, there's unique requirements for assisted living, right? How do you go about researching and staying up to date on those requirements when you're drawing up plans?
So it's really challenging. It's different city by city too, which is what makes it really difficult.
Yeah.
And so we go by the Department of Health and then we go by the city. Those are the two jurisdictions that govern that. And so the Department of Health is actually a little bit more lenient on what's required in a facility. For example, windows, they require a smaller window than a city would. And so what's challenging, like you mentioned, is each city is different. And so we have to know through experience really is what does this city require? And so I know in our big city, they're going to be the strictest. In our smaller cities, they're going to be more flexible. They're going to be more like the Department of Health. And so that's where we have to go do the code analysis and research into each city before we submit the plans to make sure, yes, this window would pass egress.
Yeah, it's something that we bring up a lot in our webinars and in our mastermind is people are like, I want the exact answer for my exact place. And we're serving all 50 states, right? And it's we're going to show you how to get the right answers and do that research and dig deep. but every single location is unique. And you're right. There's usually some sort of the health agency that governs the licensing statewide will have some requirements. And then, of course, each locality has requirements. And like you said, the bigger the city, the stricter the requirements. Yeah, I love all those insights.
And
Zach,
sometimes when it is stricter, it's actually easier, right? Because at least they lay it out there. And yeah, you might not like the requirement. It might mean you have to do an extra window or something, but at least you know exactly where you stand. And as long as you follow their rules, it's usually faster.
yeah, I completely agree. We get people all the time that's what's the best state from a regulatory standpoint to open an assisted living? And we're like, that's no. Okay, California and Washington are quote unquote really strict, right? Arizona. However, they've laid out all the rules that you can follow. We had shenanigans in South Carolina where it was like they had no idea how to do this. There's like no homes in South Carolina, and they were interpreting their own code the wrong way. Eventually, we got them to change their minds. It took a long time, but they were like, "Oh no, individual bedrooms in an assisted living residential home, those are counted as separate dwelling units, as apartments, basically." We were like, we like right. The renovation requirements were going to be way heftier. The sprinkler, the firewall, like it was going to be way worse. Yeah. We're like, this is overkill, right? We eventually got them to change their minds later, but yeah, I'm with you. Hopefully, over time, more states and more localities will understand what's happening as this continues to grow. For the listeners out there, there's not enough, and we're going to need a lot more everywhere. So if every single person listening to this podcast opens 10 homes, it won't even make a dent in what the actual need is. So get on it. If you're in Minnesota, talk to Zach, and he'll help you with the designs. Zach, when someone comes to you with a home, they're like, and we get this a lot, I have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,500 square foot house, right? When someone comes to you with a home, what's your first evaluation criteria to whether that will even work for conversion?
So most of our clients use the state waiver system. So that's how a lot of their payments are going to be made to them. And so the ideal scenario for them is to have 5 bedrooms or 5 occupants, I should say. And so that's what I'm always looking at, is making sure that if they're not at 5 bedrooms, they have the ability to get there. And then what's the layout of those 5 bedrooms, right? Are they all on the main floor? Are some in the basement or some in the upper level? Because now we're looking at going up and down stairs, right? So that's a different criteria. Usually in the 1 to the 5, it's pretty easy to convert them, honestly. But you've got to look at that basement. Is there enough head height at the bottom of the stairs, right? It's 6'4". The reason is really for a 6-foot firefighter that's going to come through, take someone up the stairs wearing a 4-inch helmet on top of his head. So people just don't think of why those rules are there, or what those rules are. But there's the ceiling and height in our state is supposed to be 7 feet with a drop down to 6'4" for beams or things like that, doors. And so that's what I'm always looking at if there's rooms in another level, right? Is making sure they're going to meet code. And then there's kitchen specific. So for our Department of Health, you've got to have a double sink. You have to have hand washing, and you have to have dishwashing. You've got to have a dishwasher, right? And so that's some of those things. And then obviously windows are the biggest thing. Bedroom windows, they have to be big enough to get out of. Otherwise, it's not a legal bedroom.
As far as size, square footage, what are your thoughts there? What recommendations do you have for folks?
There's what you can do and what you should do. So we've seen some as small as 1,500 square feet. Wow. But I find if it's 2,500 plus square feet, you could at least have a decent layout and some enough space where people can have a sitting area, and it's not just a bunch of rooms with a kitchen and a living room.
Yeah.
And so it's obviously, I prefer the bigger one. I like to have a good space for a resident to live and to move around and feel like a real house. But we've seen some pretty small ones as well.
Yeah. So we kind of look at it 300 to 500 square foot per resident, roughly. If you're doing individual rooms, you want to be on the upper end. You said 5-bed model. Is that pretty common in Minnesota?
Yeah, because if you have 4 or less, they cap what you can be reimbursed from the state. And so to get to 5, then there's not the cap. And so that's the ideal goal, is even if you don't have 5 bedrooms, you could potentially at least apply as a double occupancy or operate as a double occupancy with the goal of eventually having that 5th bedroom.
Okay. What's the biggest bedroom size you guys have helped design?
We've done in the 20s. So we did a room and board that was more of like a rehab sober home type of situation, but we could go larger, but we specialize in these residential 1 to 5 bedroom. We just do those all day.
Interesting. Okay. What are some red flags if someone brings you a home that you're like, ooh, this is probably not going to work for residential assisted living?
So my first thing is if I know it's built pre-70s, it's usually that basement's going to be an issue. So one, we've got to make sure that there's enough ceiling height in the basement. Those windows are most likely not going to pass. We've got to look in the kitchen to make sure that there's enough space to move through it and that the appliances are up to date, that there's a double sink, dishwasher, those sorts of things are immediately things that I'm thinking about and looking for.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's good. At what point in the process, let's say someone is considering buying a home, at what point in the process should they involve an architect?
Sooner rather than later. So that's why I got my real estate license, so that we can help people on the front end, so we can do the showings. They can look at a house and then they have our expertise to know before they even buy. But I would say if you already have a house, I would do it before you start submitting applications. Obviously, you can't submit your application, have it reviewed without plans, but I would do it as soon as you know there's a property that you're looking at to convert.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we've made the mistake of waiting too long on various projects. So I'm with you. And I think something that scares me a little bit, and that when someone like in our mastermind or on a webinar says, oh, I've already hired an architect, I'm always like, whoa, do they understand the rules and regulations for assisted living, specifically residential, right? Because this is a niche within a niche.
Yes.
And so it scares me when I hear someone say, oh, I have an architect. And okay, so they did 3 parking garages. Do they really know, right? Or they did some regular houses. Do they know what to do here? Because you don't want to build the thing that can't be licensed, right?
Yeah.
That scares me. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, they're drastically different, right? So the good and the bad part of it is it's still a residential house. And so if people still think about it as residential, they go to a residential architect, they can do it. But it's really a commercial use, right? It's a business where you have people living in it. And so there's 2 different sets of codes. And we obviously have had a learning curve too when we started it. And so part of that is now in 3 years of doing this full time, things change. So you have to stay updated. So even if you had someone that might have done 1 in the last 3 years, I bet that city's changed rules since then. I bet the Department of Health's changed rules since then. So you really need someone that knows what they're doing and does this day in and day out.
Hey there, sorry to interrupt this episode, but I've got a question for you. Do you want to share in the wealth and incredible returns from the highest demand asset class in real estate without the hassle of doing it all yourself, or at least not yet? Residential assisted living is booming, and it's only gaining momentum. That's why we created an investment fund at Open Range Capital, so you can benefit without the heavy lifting. With the silver tsunami upon us, demand for assisted living is far outpacing supply, making this the can't miss opportunity for the next few decades. We provide access to fully vetted investment opportunities that are primed for success and ready to deliver strong passive returns. Don't wait, ride the wave with us. Visit theralroom.com/invest to partner with us on future investment opportunities. Again, that's theralroom.com/invest. We look forward to connecting with you. Now back to the episode.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. How involved do you get with the general contractor that's going to be implementing those changes?
So right now, because it is fairly easy to convert these houses, there's typically not a ton of work. And so usually it'll only be if there's windows or maybe a railing has spindles that are too wide, things like that. So we can help coordinate it. And we work with those general contractors. But honestly, those projects are pretty minor where the homeowner themselves could do it, or they hire us to do it for them just to make it easier for themselves.
Gotcha. For the 5-bedroom or 5 residents, is fire suppression required?
It's not. So that's where the threshold is 5 and 6, right? So people always try to stay at 5.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Any idea what the state pay is on 5-bed?
Yeah, it depends on the patient, obviously, but I would say low end, you're looking at $250 a day, and you could, for a normal resident, you're looking between $250 to $400 per day.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah, we talk about this a lot. Like in most states, under 6 bed and less doesn't work. But in a few states, due to state pay, it can work really well.
Yeah.
Or just due to higher pricing in those states. So if we were to do a 5-bed in Georgia, probably not going to work. So it is interesting. It's interesting to hear that a 5-bed will work in Minnesota.
Well, and that's where some creative financing on the buy side could really help you too, right?
Have you
Like if
seen
you
that?
could get a subject to property, you could
Yeah.
take over that home for very little down and your payment's not crazy, right? And so your overhead wouldn't be high, and then you could actually do waivers as your primary payment source.
Interesting. Okay. So for someone listening who's intimidated by this whole process, I have the DHS, I have the city requirements. What is it that they should understand about it?
I would hire. Honestly, there's a lot to learn in it. It
Yeah.
seems intimidating at front, so it depends on how much you're willing to research. Obviously, with AI now, it's a lot easier to do some of that research, but you also have to fact check it and know you're doing the right
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would look at a consultant for your Department of Health application. Obviously, you have to have an architect to do the plans. But beyond that, too, it's just doing your research. Groups like you guys, how do we start, right? What things should we be thinking about? And the common thing I actually see is people are super excited. They get into it. They can open a facility. Now what? How do you get your patients in, right? How do you get your
Yeah.
clients to get there? Are you going to do waivers? Are you going to do private pay? Those are two drastically different things. And how are you going to market to both of those? And so that's honestly one of the things I see is the biggest struggle is people can get open and operating, but how do you get clients in?
Yeah. Yeah. We've talked about that a lot recently because a lot of our members are at that stage. And it's wild to see how many existing homes out there, especially the ones that have been around a while, have almost no marketing. It's pretty wild. What do you mean you don't have a website or a Google My Business? Oh, it's virtually free. I'm just like, what? We've also had folks that are reluctant to go out and do the networking in the community. That's how you're going to do it initially. That's how you're going to get your first residents is building those referral relationships and networking in the community. And people are like averse to that. And I don't get that. That's what it's going to take. Once you get the home full and people see how great it is, then you're going to get referrals from staff and family and friends and stuff. But until you establish that track record, you got to go out there and you got to kiss babies, and shake hands. So it's super important. Do you have anything that you've seen that's worked pretty well?
Yeah, so I always recommend professional photography on the back end. Think of it as like listing your house for sale, right? You want to show it off in the best possible light. And so if you have it fully staged and it's ready for people to move in, I would have a photographer come in for $200 to $400, get all the professional photos, and then like you said, put it on a website, right? Have it all there. And then we on the back end with one of our packages, we'll do 3D plans and a 3D video walkthrough. So our clients could use that, put that on the website, and it could go whether it's to a private pay client or to a social worker, caseworker, it can go to them. They can walk the property without ever having to see it. And like you said, on private pay, it's a totally different marketing system. How are you going to do it? On the waiver side, which we primarily deal with, build as many connections to social workers, caseworkers as you can. And if you can have these websites, these plans, these photos up front, you can send a weekly newsletter to all of them and just say, hey, we have one vacancy. Do you have anyone in mind? And so if you're constantly reaching out and contacting them, you're top of mind and you're the person they're likely going to go to first if they have someone.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really good suggestion. And yeah, so it's the networking, it's the getting out there. Yeah, everything we hit on. And yeah, you're right. The photos do matter. Photos do matter. Put those on a really nice website. You got to at least look like you're professional online. We've seen some pretty terrible websites, right? And it's not that hard to make a website these days.
No.
Or you can hire someone for $1,000, $2,000 to make a great website. People really underestimate the value of paying for those kind of services and paying for marketing or marketers. If you don't want to do that stuff yourself, it still needs to be done. It's still part of your business, right? We look at residential assisted living as 3 businesses, right? You got the real estate piece and purchasing that and financing that and funding that, whatever that takes, renovating it, all those parts and pieces. So that's one part of the business. You've got the operations, right? Running the day-to-day, providing the care, caring for the residents. And then there's the marketing piece, because if you don't have that, if you don't have a way to attract residents, you don't have a business.
Sure.
And so we see it as 3 separate businesses, and you don't have to be good at all of them, but you do have to have all 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's gotta happen.
Totally agree.
Let's see here. Let's see. Do you have a real estate investing background at all? Or did you kind of jump into this directly?
Yeah, so I used to work in finance. I was in wealth management at a family office. And so that's kind of where my career started. I was pre-med in college, got into finance. But yeah, we've invested privately. We've had small multifamily, single family. So I do have a background in it. And now that I've gotten my real estate license, I'm trying to get more involved into it just to be more helpful to our clients, right? So I reach out in the community and just say, hey, are there any single family houses for rent? Because some of our clients can't buy. And so single family houses aren't as valuable as a rental because you have a lot more risk. You have one family in there, right? But now if I could pair it with an operator, you could have a 3-year lease instead of a 1-year lease. You have a business instead of a private family, which they're going to do everything to keep their business afloat, right? And so it's a lot more attractive to those homeowners. And so that's why I'm trying to do a lot more in our community is reach out to those people and get more involved in assisted living, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. You're building the whole business around assisted living, which is great.
Exactly.
Hold on here. Sorry, lost my train of thought. What separates a profitable layout from a less profitable one? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, obviously occupant is the biggest thing. If you can't maximize your occupants, you're in trouble. Because you already said, if you have 5 or less, you're running on much thinner margins than if you had a facility with 10 to 20. And so you've got to be able to have that space. And so what does that look like as far as if you have people that aren't able to get around, you have to make sure you have a ramp to get into your property. You have to make sure if there's multiple levels they need to get to, you either have to have a lift or an elevator, something to move them around. And so those are the biggest things, just making sure also bathrooms like roll-in shower, walk-in shower versus a tub, right? That makes a big difference for someone that's in a wheelchair. And so those would be the things, is just maximizing your occupant count and then making it as easy as it can be for those people that don't have the accessibility to get around in that facility or location.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Do you see most of these homes being individual bedrooms, single occupancy, or do you see it mostly being dual?
It's usually single. The only time we've typically seen dual occupancy is if it's a couple. They'll try to get a couple in there to keep them together. Usually if they do that, they still end up having their own bedrooms too, in case there's feuds between the two. Or if potentially they just don't have 5 bedrooms, right?
Yeah.
And so if they only have 4 bedrooms, then yeah, if they want to get to 5 occupants, they have to double occupy a room.
Okay. Let's kind of change gears to talk about trends for residential assisted living design and the industry. What trends are you seeing right now in the design space?
A lot more on accessibility. So there's a lot of people that we're not necessarily there statewide as far as requiring it, but they're widening doors, right? Minimum 36-inch door. And so a lot of the older homes are at 28-inch doors, and that's a drastic difference. You can't push a wheelchair through it. You can't push a walker through it. So we're seeing some people voluntarily do that, as well as, like I said, the walk-in shower. We're having a much more accessible open bathroom versus the old-fashioned vanity toilet tub across, right? And so making them much wider, much more open. Building code is actually changing this year in our state. And so we're going to see what those requirements are, but they're talking about potentially elevators. And so if you have to put an elevator in a single family house, what does that look like, right? Most houses don't have the location. Where do you do that? You have to structurally hold up the rest of your house, put an elevator in. And so that's something I'm looking for now, is if we have to get there, and even if you're grandfathered in for a certain amount of time, if you eventually have to put an elevator in, where are we going to put that? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Not even a stair chair will work?
We haven't gotten the official guidance yet. It comes out this fall, but yeah, I would hope it'd be a lift or something.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Are you seeing more investors and operators getting into the space? Is it ramping up?
We are. It's definitely been a huge increase. We see a lot of people that are in the medical field, obviously the nurses that are tired of the hospital. They want to do it for themselves, or the assisted living facility or the nursing home, and they want to do it for themselves. So we get a lot of those people that are going to operate it themselves. Obviously, it's a little bit different model than if it's an outside investor who's going to hire that director, hire that nurse on staff. We are, like I said, I mentioned before that I'm going to a lot of investors that are just holding the property. And so we're getting a lot more people that are just holding it and renting out to our operators. So they're not involved in the actual business, but we're getting a lot more people that are investing in it by just holding the property and putting operators inside of them.
Yeah, we call that lease-to-operator, and that's how we got started.
Yeah,
in
it's pretty
Phoenix.
model.
Yeah, it's interesting. What are they renting these single-family homes for? Do you have any idea what the kind of premium on the rent is?
Yeah, I usually say it's 1.5 to 2x what a single family house is. In our area, I usually see between 3,500 and 5,000, depending on how big the facility is. Home is.
Yeah. So for the listener, the thing that really intrigued us, me and my partners, Alex and Luke, was that you could basically rent a home for 1.5 to 3x the normal long-term annual rent rate because it's been redesigned. It's licensable as an assisted living home, right? And a lot of folks that are trying to start their assisted living business, maybe a caregiver that wants to now open their own home, they may not have the cash to purchase a home. So it makes this really cool symbiotic relationship where, hey, you can, as an investor, if you're like a real estate investor, but you want to get more rents on a home, but not have more responsibilities, like in an Airbnb, good Lord. It's like we alluded to, it's when the getting was good. It's like having an Airbnb income with a long-term rental of effort. In fact, on ours, it's even less because we usually just do a home warranty and then tell the tenants you're responsible for everything else because we don't want to have the liability of the AC breaking and then that coming back to us. We're like, no, just fix it. Just call the warranty and make it happen. So we actually end up having less work to do on these homes, which is pretty wild. And they're 5-year leases, which is cool. So with built-in 3% increases a year, that kind of stuff. So yeah, big fan of that model. So I think that's pretty cool. So it sounds like Minnesota is a good spot to do it. And Zach will sell you the home. Do you see or have you been involved in any developments ground up?
Very few. We see some of them. It's obviously a challenging environment now, and just building costs are so high. And so you really have to have a strong system in place in order to even get into the development, but then definitely on the operation side.
Gotcha. Okay. What's the single, so we'll wrap this up here, but before we do that, and before we get into how people can work with you, I'm curious, what's the single most important thing people should know before buying a property to convert for RAL? What would you say is the...
That's a good question. I think just the overall layout, right? If you're going to have a house and people are going to live there, you want to make it a true home. And so having a good layout for your clients, knowing some of the rules behind it is obviously very helpful. If you have big enough windows, if you have stairs, are you going to have a lift or an elevator? And so just that general layout, like how do you want to have a nice house for these people to live in?
Yeah. No, I do think that's critical. And I would prefer single story.
Yeah, I would too.
Zach, what are you most excited about right now at R2 Studios?
I just think that this field is really picking up. Obviously, we always hear about the silver tsunami, and we're, I think, at the front end of it. And I love seeing people, I love our operators that truly get to leave the corporate world and do it for themselves, right? They're starting their own business. And so that's really exciting for me, is I love to watch people go from just purchase a house to now super successful, right? Doing it on their own terms and then scaling too, right? You don't have to have just one. In Minnesota, as a director, you can have up to 5. Okay, wow. You got to 5. Oh, do I have a friend that also would be interested? Now you can partner with them. They can be a director. Now you have another 5. And so it's really fun to see someone go from that beginning of just buying a house all the way up to potentially 5 or more properties and really changing their life.
I love that. And we tell people, when people have a call with us to see if they're interested in joining our mastermind community, it always comes up. And people don't get in this to just do one, right? The impact you can make, as well as the, not just on seniors and families, on your family, right? And your family wealth and cash flow situation and freedom is massive. It's a win-win-win for everyone, right? And I've never seen any other industry quite like this, where, hey, we can make a big impact and make a profit at the same time, which is wild. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool to see. We just got back from our Houston event. We just had an event in Houston where we toured 3 different homes, one ground up, one that just opened, and one that's a renovation. And that was just wild to see, oh, all this is happening. All these families are going to be impacted. All these staff are going to be hired because of this mastermind and people just taking action. It's pretty wild to see.
What do you find is the biggest obstacle right now to open a new home, whether it's a small one or a large one? What are you seeing as the biggest obstacle?
Funding. Funding is the thing that comes up nonstop, and SBA is hard. When you can get it, it's awesome. That's the path we want most people to get to for their first decently sized project. But it's that gap in between. They don't have the experience, or there's things like, hey, they want to buy the land first, right? Oh, now you got to have the money to buy the land, and most lenders don't want to give you more than 50% down. It's hard, right? So we're working on that. We have some ideas. We've been doing some research, and we're hoping to help solve that problem in the near future. But that's what we see as the biggest issue. Now, I don't want people listening to be like, oh, cool, and then I don't have to have any money to get started. No, you got to have some money to get started if you want to own the property too.
Yeah.
The cheapest path is to just lease it and start. That can be done, but there's also creative financing. Like so many of our members have leveraged creative financing on the seller or on the land or on the house, and so there's definitely some options to get started without it being huge out of pocket. But for anybody listening, yes, you're going to have to put some money up front, some due diligence, some cash. So it does take something to get started generally, but you can get pretty creative.
And just on that, like our small homes, the 1 to 5, that's a residential home. So you get residential financing. So the really nice part is most of our clients, it was their personal residence, right? And so they could get in for 3.5% to 5% down, which is much different than a large commercial facility, right? And so
yeah, that's a good point. That's not typically what people that we're seeing are doing. They're usually trying to go for 10 to 16 beds.
Sure.
So it's hard to do conventional financing on that, but you're right, you can be done. And that happens a lot in Washington state too.
Okay.
Because they're usually a 4 to 5 bed model as well. Again, the state pay is really good. Yeah. Interesting stuff. Yeah. Are you at all worried about that state pay changing and over time?
There are some concerns statewide. I would say our operators are definitely concerned because the 245D program was shut down in our state. And so that was some of that adult daycare. And we heard about the autism centers, that sort of thing. And so the thought was, when are we next, right? So it's license 144G in Minnesota as assisted living. And so when does that get cut, or what does that look like? I have a hard time believing that they would actually cut funding to house senior adults.
It would be hard.
It would be very difficult, and it's a very bad look that would be challenging to come back from.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, I think it's difficult for them to actually cut it, but obviously there's always a risk.
Yeah, there is. I agree. I think that senior care is the least risky of all the options, right? I'll give you a little story here of a mistake we made. When we were buying homes in Phoenix for Lease-to-operator, we did assisted living. And then we're like, oh, this one's a sober living home. And so we kind of did some research. We're like, oh, that's interesting. This could work too. And we're like, it's adjacent. Let's do it. Now, at the time, there was a lot of unlicensed sober living going on. We're like, hey, we only want an operator that's licensed, going to be licensed or get licensed. And so we found one, and he was working on his license. And like out of the blue, the state shut off the entire program. There were hundreds of these homes. And so they shut pay down to all of them. I don't know what happened to all the people who needed the actual sober living arrangement. I had no idea what happened, but our operator skipped town. He's like, I can't get paid. I can't do this, and left. Right. And so we're like, holy smokes. And the state did not reinstate the program for another 1.5 years. And then it was very regulated after that. Now, the problem was they weren't regulating it before, and there was a lot of shady stuff happening. So I get why it happened. I just didn't like the way it happened because so we felt some risk with that, because that home can only be a group home. It can't be assisted living more than 5. And so we had trouble renting it. We went through a couple of tenants. We're good to go now. But yeah, we wouldn't do it again. We would only focus on assisted living for that exact reason. We think that the demand's always going to be high. It's going to continue to go up, and that politically, like, it would be traumatic to turn that off. This isn't an Airbnb. It's like the only thing that people want more of right now for building new stuff too. Yeah, I agree. But okay, enough on my tangent there. Zach, how can people get a hold of you if they want to buy a home and Lease-to-operator, if they're opening or they want to renovate a home in Minnesota? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so our website has a form. We're R2 Studios Architecture. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, all the social media, LinkedIn. Reach out to us. We can absolutely help you on the front end, just buying the right property. But we can also absolutely, if you already have an existing home, help you to convert it, see what it would actually take to convert it, and then do the plans to get you moving forward in the process.
Awesome, man, dude. Thank you so much for your time today. This was awesome. I loved the tactical nature of the episode and getting down in the weeds on actually designing homes and getting them renovated for assisted living. So we really appreciate your insights today, Zach.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the Raw Room Assisted Living Podcast. We hope you found today's episode insightful. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave us a raving 5-star review. And a quick review helps more listeners find the show and more seniors get the exceptional care they deserve.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And just so you know, we have prepared some free resources for you to help you succeed in residential assisted living in addition to this podcast. Head over to theralroom.com, that is the RAL room.com, to download our free 10-step guide to launch your first or next residential assisted living home, or our 10 reasons to passively invest in residential assisted living ebooks.
And if you're ready to take the next step and make real moves in the RAL industry, join us in the RAL Room Mastermind. It is an exclusive community where we deep dive into everything you need to launch and grow your own residential assisted living business. You'll get access to recorded courses, live calls with industry experts, a RAL calculator, resources and tools, like-minded entrepreneurs, funding opportunities, and an expert networking community to help you along your journey.
Be sure to join us next time on the Rail Room Podcast as we continue to explore the world of residential assisted living with more great guests. See you then.